So this is chapter 24, and we only have this and two other chapters before we come to the end of the book, so I think it's all going to time itself kind of neatly for this period. And Pali for this little section is Appamano cha olaro obhaso loke paturahosi Atikameva devanang devanubhavam. And you have a picture of the dawn sky, and then a couple of monks on the arms round in the village in somewhere in Asia. And this character here looks a little bit like me. There was a photograph of me as a novice on alms round that was knocking around Chithurst at that time, so I think either consciously or unconsciously Ajahn Sucitto put me into this picture. Maybe not, maybe it's just my projection, but it looks suspiciously like the original photo. So the words for this passage mean, and a great measureless radiance surpassing the very nature of the devas was displayed in the world. And the chapter is called Light in the World. One can take this to mean that, at that time, the Buddha produced a great light. There are said to be 4 such occasions: when a Buddha-to-be begins his last birth, when that Bodhisattva realizes complete enlightenment, when the Buddha first transmits the Dhamma, and when the Buddha passes from the mortal form. Such a light is said to be visible throughout the world system, from the Avicii hell to the Brahmaloka. And that's when the words used to describe it, when it reaches down into the hell realms, it says something along the lines of, and even in those dark interstitial spaces where when light never shows, there this radiance appeared, so that one being there was able to see another and to realize, oh, there are other living beings here. So it's described as reaching into those deep and darkest of all regions, and then up into the rarefied zones of the Brahmaloka as well, at the other end of the scale. Impressive though this may be, to me, such a light is measurable, or at least more measurable than the light of the Buddha's wisdom, which extends through time also. The light of truth certainly surpasses the glory of the devas. And he gives a quote from the Anguttara Nikaya Book of the Fours. Bhikkhus, there are these 4 radiances: the radiance of the moon, the radiance of the sun, the radiance of fire, and the radiance of wisdom. Bhikkhus, among these 4, the radiance of wisdom is indeed the most excellent. That is what Buddhas bring into the world, and it's boundless in that it can encompass the 10,000-fold world system, the Devaloka, the hell worlds, the animal worlds, in fact, all the 6 realms of existence, and it's brought into this world as a teaching for human beings. When human beings incline towards truth, they bring forth qualities that are lovely. Kindness, gentleness, patience, generosity are natural aspects of the abandonment of self-view through insight. They manifest in ways that are tangible in planetary life. This painting brings us back to earth, which can be a very beautiful place when the light of truth shines in it. The painting depicts one way in which what is beautiful appears. It's a tribute to a practice of Dhamma that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, that of going on alms round in the early morning. Dawn in tropical countries is an exquisite time of day. The rest of the day one feels very hot and sticky, but the dawn is always fresh and evanescent. The scene of the painting is rather as I have imagined the alms round, the Pindabata, in India at the time of the Buddha. In fact, the rural districts of Thailand looked like this when I lived there as a monk. Some of the simple houses with their grass roofs are perched on stilts to prevent flooding during the rains. The village in the painting is very simple. Behind it is the river, while in the background is perhaps Varanasi itself, near where the Buddha was teaching. And during the time when the Buddha gave these teachings, some of the group of 5 would go out collecting alms food, which they all shared. In living as alms mendicants, Buddhist monks and nuns relax their hold on the most fundamental requisite for existence. This is a great renunciation. It's not the food itself that is renounced, but the hold on it. Monks and nuns have to live on what people offer, when it is offered. They don't store food past noon, nor can they follow any preferences about food. Bhikkhus who have been strict vegetarian Brahmins would train themselves to accept meat given by people of the untouchable caste. That cuts through a lot. Even today, people have strong views about food, protein, unsaturated fats, meat, vitamins. But to train yourself to live upon what is given means that you eat generosity. So this is a very significant issue, and one that comes up over and over again quite regularly. People, when they come here, they see that there's meat or fish and such on the servery, and they say, "Oh, I'm surprised you're just taking the first precept against killing, and yet there's meat being offered here, or that people are taking that." And so over and over again, I have to emphasize that the Buddha established his teaching on on generosity, and it seems he was very keen not to turn his teaching into a food religion, which was already in his time very much the realm of the Brahmin caste, and later on became very, very strictly, even more strictly so. So that the ruling that we have as monastics is that we are required to accept with appreciation whatever is offered, whether it's vegetarian food or non-vegetarian food, unless we see, hear, or suspect that some animal or fish or bird has been killed, especially to be given to the Sangha, then we are required to accept it with appreciation. And so you're obligated to respect the generosity and the good-heartedness that are motivating the people to bring that to offer, that they consider it to be good food, otherwise they wouldn't bring it. And so it's your duty to respect their generosity and their kindness, and not to abide in pickiness about what you think as being good food or bad food. So that's very much a feature of the southern Buddhist world. In China, then some of the traditions of the Indian point of view, the Brahmin point of view particularly, and other ethical constraints came into the picture, so that in China it's standard for monastics to be vegetarian, and that any monastic who ate fish or meat would be considered someone who was breaking the rules or not following the training. And the it's interesting to see, if you look at the Dharmagupta Patimoksha, which is the training rules. It's pretty much identical to the one that we have in the Pali, except for the rule that we have about not asking for kind of quote unquote fine food, fish or meat, from a lay person, as that one is slightly tweaked in the Dharmagupta recension, but otherwise pretty much all, except for in the minor rules at the end, there's a set of rules about how to behave around stupas, but that's very noticeable, that one rule that talks about accepting non-vegetarian food or asking for non-vegetarian food has been altered so that it's because in their ascension of things, then it's unthinkable for monastics to eat meat or fish. So it's when people ask about it, then what my usual response is that if people ask, or they say, well, what do you recommend? And I say, well, if people ask, then I'll recommend vegetarian food. But if people don't ask, I'll never bring it up, because people have intense opinions about food, as you might have noticed, or you might even harbour a few yourself, and so that was something that Lumpur Sumedho also felt very strongly about, that whenever people in the Sangha got particularly militant about vegetarianism, he would sort of come down like a ton of bricks. He was the one who introduced vegetarian food in northeast Thailand, that Wat Pah Nanachat when they first opened that up, took him a year to persuade the villagers that the monks or Wat wouldn't die if they just were given vegetarian food. The lay people thought you couldn't live on that kind of a diet, and that they would all the Western monks would die, and that they would be blamed. And so they were sort of tearfully begging Ajahn Amaro to not try and encourage that. But eventually they learned how to cook vegetarian food, and so you have the most wonderful vegetarian banquets there at Wat Pah Nanachat these days. Even though it's sort of remote part of northeast Thailand, it's a lot more sort of developed nowadays. But it's the principle is that you live on kindness, and that you don't make any stipulation or choice about what people choose to offer you as food. It's up to you. Once it's in your bowl, you can choose to eat it or not eat it as you like. That's your business. But you should. The one of the rules that we have is to accept alms food with appreciation. So that as Ajahn Sucitto puts it here, you train yourself to live on what's given, which means that you eat generosity. So those of us who've been in robes for a number of years, so this is a totally donated body. I've been in living on alms food since 1978. That was the last time I bought any food was 1978. So this is a totally donated body. This body has come out of my alms bowl several times over. So I've been a monk for 36 years, and they say that your cells of your body are replaced every 7 years. So that's 5 times over. This body's been replaced. This is a totally donated body. This has come out of my alms bowl. Many of you have contributed to this body. It hasn't come from anywhere else apart from breathing in oxygen and drinking water out of the tap. So that's where these bodies come from. So when you can relate to your body as a donated, this is the product of people's generosity, then it also changes the way that you look at your own physical form and how you relate to what you are. So as a monastic, it's also significant that the word bhikkhu means one who lives on alms. Bhiksha, even today in India, means an offering of alms food or a morsel of food. So bhiksha is the Sanskrit or Hindi for bhikkhu. So that's how we define ourselves, as one who lives on offered food, and so that is in a way defining your place in the world as a monastic. And so and it's also the case that even if you're the very, very high-ranking person and you're as a monastic, that the same rules apply. So that even if you're the Sangharaja, the Supreme Patriarch, you still can't keep food over from today and keep it for tomorrow, or you can't ask lay people to prepare particular food for you unless you're ill. And so that even though you might have a lot of say power or position in terms of the monastic order or in social in the society or in the social order of things, still you have no control over what you eat. You can't make sure that you've got enough for tomorrow, or that something's going to be there tomorrow, or that or to get what you like today. It's out of your hands. You can't ask for food. You can't store it up overnight. You can't make stipulation. You can't go into the kitchen and say, I think you should cook this instead of cooking that. All of that is completely verboten. So even if you have you're very senior, you have a very high rank, there's that very, very basic vulnerability. The rank means nothing because in some respects your physical survival still depends on your relationship with the broader community, and that you're never, at least in the southern Buddhist world where these rules are kept very strictly, you're never exempt from that. And so that I feel is a very skillful and beautiful principle that you have that constant reflection of uncertainty and vulnerability in relationship just to your very life and your very physical being. These mendicants are not even allowed to ask for food, but only to be present for those who wish to make an offering. It may sound phony to you, but in the practice of walking for alms, any thought of where and whether any food is going to be found just causes suffering. Naturally, one is not inclined to emotionally pressurize anyone to give food. That would be difficult to live with. The result is that the only way to go for alms mindfully and without suffering is to go without seeking, but with the attitude, may those who would be made happy by giving offer what they please. Monks and nuns don't promise people long life or spiritual rewards, but in receiving in silence and composure, try to generate the kind of attention that will allow the donor to focus on the purity and joy of their own goodness. The act of receiving alms food sets up the reflection to make oneself worthy of the generosity of others, and to share what one has received with fellow monks and nuns. For the spiritual life, such themes are the most precious form of nourishment. It's also outside of the retreat time, then the nuns and monks here on a fairly steady basis go on the alms round into Berkhamsted or other places around, or go on long tudong walks through the countryside. And so if you're going for alms round in Berkhamsted, then you'd walk in with one or two other monks, and then just go and stand on the street. So in Thailand, you don't stop and pause. You walk along because people understand that they want to make offerings. They'll wait beside the pathway or the road and have the things they want to offer. In Britain, then they don't know to stop you. Usually people don't want to interrupt. They don't want to impose, and so if you walk along, they're very unlikely to stop you. So in this country, we adopt more of the Indian style of alms round, which is going and standing in one place for a period of time. So, and in Berkhamsted, even being there for half an hour, 40 minutes, usually your alms bowl is brimming. You have to kind of move along, otherwise you're going to have more than you can possibly consume and more than you can carry comfortably. And that's not offerings necessarily from people who know the monastery or who know you at all, but can be from total strangers or people who are not familiar with you. And then also walking on tudong, going through the countryside, then similarly, that's the way you generally receive alms. Just go and stand by the shops in the local town or the market, and just you're not allowed to kind of hold your bowl in people's faces or to go and knock on doors or such like, but just as Ajahn Sucitto says here, may those who would be made happy by giving offer what they please. And so, our the rules that we have about the alms round are also very specific, so that you're not allowed to get in people's way or ask for anything or even hint. And you're supposed to have the bowl somewhat covered up by your robe, so that you're not sort of holding the bowl out in people's faces. And it's interesting that when Lumpur Sumedho first came to live in London, one of the things that he was surprised at was that Ajahn Chah was very, very insistent that the monks should go out on alms round every day. And he was quite liberal in some respects, saying they could change the way they did the chanting, or they could change the robes and wear extra warm things underneath and so on. But one thing he was really insistent on was that you must go on the alms round every single day. And they were quite surprised at how he was so emphatic about that. And his reasoning was that it was also part of the monk's duty to be the fourth heavenly messenger, as the Devaduta, and also seeing that the Hamsa Vihara was a little place, and that Buddhist monks were pretty rare in England, and he could see that the tendency is going to be want to stay in the house and not go anywhere because you look so weird out on the street, and you're this strange item, so that you don't want to have to bother dealing with people's weird projections about you dressing like a weirdo. And so he said, no, you have to go out and fly the flag every day. And also I think he realized that if they all stayed cooped up in the little vihara, they'd end up killing themselves or killing each other. So, and also that was how they got given Chithurst Forest, was meeting somebody on alms round. But it was so because Ajahn Chah was very insistent about that. Then people in the Buddhist group, the English Sangha Trust, they were a bit concerned, like because Venerable Kapilawado and the other monks that had been there before had never been on alms round or never made anything of that at all. And so they decided to look into it, and they got they hired a QC, a Queen's Counsel, to give them a legal opinion. And this fellow, George Sharp tells an interesting story about this, that when this fellow did this research for them and wrote a formal legal opinion about it, he said, you know, if the Buddha had sat down with the 1848 Vagrancy Act and designed the laws of that govern your alms round, he couldn't have structured it more precisely to fit the demands of the English law. Because what you have to do, the way you have to keep your eyes down, you're not allowed to talk to people, you're not allowed to stand in people's way, you're not allowed to harass anyone or obstruct anyone. Or it drives a line straight through the middle of the 1848 Vagrancy Act. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with you going on alms round. There's no legal obstruction to it whatsoever. That you're completely within your rights to do exactly as your rules tell you should. That was a interesting little piece of British history. For the householders, the alms round helps to give the day a structure that reflects on spiritual themes and keeps them in touch with the example of renunciation, which is not always apparent in the world. The generosity that it entails is a fundamental aspect of the enlightened mind. The whole practice is based on a bringing forth from oneself, and it's nourished by the joy that comes when such giving of oneself is done without demand or expectation. When it's performed in a way that transcends any personal connections, people find it easier to focus on the quality of their own mind and connect with their selflessness. Generosity is one example of the many illuminating experiences of the way. So he's pointing to this theme of this is what brings a brightness into the world, that there's acts of generosity, of unselfishness, and the great bright light that illumines the world from the hell realms up to the heavens, rather than being sort of blazing megawatts of light emerging from the Buddha, but that light that comes from unselfishness and that is say illuminating the heart. And in Thailand in particular, which is a place I'm most familiar with, the alms round is a very strong tradition, and that even little infant children that are just a few months old, that the family will bring them in and involve them in the alms round, so that the mother or a big sister will have the baby in their arms, and they'll put a lump of sticky rice in the kid's hand, and then hold the baby's hand over the bowl and shake it, because sticky rice is pretty sticky, so shake the baby's hand till the rice drops out into the bowl, and then everyone says, "Oh, gang mark, very good." And so then the baby says, "Oh, everyone's smiling. That's scored a point." And so right from the 6 months old, or 8 or 9 months old, they're getting that message that object leaving the hand, everyone smiles, good, and that. So that generosity and the joy of giving is being brought into the picture from even before language is coming into focus. It's possible to live spiritually in the world if you don't hold it. There is no need to get rid of the body or not have contact with other people. The light of the Dhamma allows us to see the value of living according to spiritual conventions, standards and reflections, rather than material values, ego needs, and social pressures. I'll read that again, it's an important sentence. The light of the Dhamma allows us to see the value of living according to spiritual conventions, standards and reflections, rather than material values, ego needs, and social pressures. The Eightfold Path is the basis of a spiritual society in which householders and monastics can live. To sustain that relationship of mutual participation in Dhamma without personal holding is a very fine practice. The training in this area is what the Buddha called Vinaya, meaning that which dispels or leads out of delusion. Vinaya is generally considered to be a monastic code of discipline, which is true in a way. But more accurately, it's a very comprehensive practical exposition on the moral and ethical application of the Eightfold Path. There are books of Vinaya which describe the practice for the lifestyle of the samana, disciple, while some of the suttas, notably the Sigalavada Sutta in the Digha Nikaya and the Mahamangala Sutta in the Sutta Nipata, address people living the family life. Thus the Vinaya trains us to live in ways that will be conducive to higher understanding and liberation. The frugality of a samana's material belongings, the code of polite and kindly behavior between monks, nuns and lay people, are all supportive of more composed and gentle mind states. It's all a voluntary training that one takes on as a personal responsibility and living example of one's aspirations towards truth. Yet it is concerned with mundane details of life, such as monks not hassling nuns to wash their robes for them, avoiding currying favour with influential people, how to deal with disputes, and how to offer correction to someone in a non-threatening and kindly way. There's a lot of skill and little idealism in the Vinaya. By using it, the mind comes to reflect upon the nature of ethics, realistically appraise material needs, and learn about love without sentiment or fantasy. It's also significant that Luang Por Chah often used to point out that people say that meditation is one thing and the sila is another. That virtue is over here, and meditation's over there, and wisdom's over there. But he would stress the fact that the use of the precepts in the Vinaya training and the precepts for the lay community is primarily a training in mindfulness, because if you take the precepts seriously, and then for the monastics having the Vinaya training, there's a very, very precise code of what you should and shouldn't do all the time. So it's making you mindful of those impulses to chase after something that you want, or to get rid of, or to react against something that you don't want, and so that the presence of the precepts helps to sustain a mindfulness of those moods and reactions of liking and disliking, approving, disapproving. If you've taken a precept against lying, the Musavada precept, then as you're telling a story or you're talking to someone and you realize as you're speaking, well, it didn't really quite happen that way. I think I'm exaggerating here. That you notice that, and you notice the fact that it wasn't quite true, the thing that you're saying, because of the precept. So that the precept is helping you to be mindful of the words that you're forming and the account that you're giving. And so Luang Por Chah would say that one of the great benefits of the precepts is precisely that. It helps you to be more mindful and to see what's wholesome, what's unwholesome, and to look at the nature of cause and effect in terms of our actions and our speech. And so that, just as Ajahn Sucitto is saying here, there's a lot of skill and little idealism in Vinaya. By using it, the mind comes to reflect upon the nature of ethics, realistically appraise material needs, and learn about love without sentiment or fantasy. So that it helps you to be mindful of what you really need, what you want, or what you're averse to, what you can be patient with, and so then it directly supports those brightening qualities of heart. And again, that's another aspect of this, bringing the light into the world. This training has great beauty in it. It has a beauty on the conventional plane, that it provides the practical guidelines for non-attachment within the world of relationships, duties and possessions. No wonder that the Vinaya is described as the lifeblood of the Buddhist life. Vinayo Sasana Ayu is the Pali for that particular principle. But of course, you have to use Vinaya with right view, with a mind that inclines towards understanding and working with the actualities of human nature. Otherwise, it can become a meaningless code of do's and don'ts, with all the moralizing righteousness or blind adherence to the letter of the law that permeates immature humanity. So the complete teachings of the Buddha are a complementary pair, Dhamma and Vinaya. Vinaya keeps the Dhamma from being abstract and idealistic. Dhamma instills a non-dogmatic flexibility to Vinaya. Together, they keep the light of the Buddha's dispensation going, as it has for thousands of years, through many different countries and civilizations. So that's very, very often how the Buddha characterizes his teaching as the Dhamma Vinaya, the Dhamma, the teaching and the discipline as a single unit, and so we tend to think of Dhamma as being the teaching, but it's also Dhamma and Sila, Dhamma and Vinaya as a partnership. And many of you probably are familiar with the when Luang Por Sumedho was a young monk, and Ajahn Chah one day asked him, said, Sumedho, you must have found it really confusing, because Dhamma is all about letting go, and the Vinaya is all about holding on, and so that's probably something that seems strange or brings doubt into your mind, and so the young Ajahn Sumedho said, yes, actually that's true. It is confusing, and the way that Luang Por Chah had put it gave the sense that he was about to explain, how that all functioned. But what he said instead was, well, when you figure out how they work together, then you'll be fine. And that was all he got. So the Dhamma is all about letting go, the Vinaya is all about holding on. When you figure out how they fit together, then everything will be you'll be all right. So that's the end of that chapter. It's a short one, but I think Ajahn Sucitto was particularly inspired in. He already had a number of super duper radiances, and the 10,000-fold universal system shaking and quaking and rocking in the previous one, and so that this sense of this great light permeating through the universe as being just that simple light of acting in a generous way, living on alms, and the sustaining of the Dhamma Vinaya in the world. So I thought that was quite a brilliant gesture to make with this particular painting. So that's the end of that chapter. If anyone has any particular questions or things to ask about, then please go right ahead. Yes, Lawrence.
Someone in the sala a few weeks ago, someone asked about the Amaravati, damaging the fruits, and I heard it was to do with Vinaya, but I didn't really understand why.
Well, it is. It's because sometimes fruits have viable seeds in them, like a tangerine. And so part of our rules is that we're not allowed to damage a living plant. So that, not even allowed to break a blade of grass or a leaf on a tree if it's alive. If it's a dead leaf or whatever, then that's permissible. So in a fruit like a tangerine or a grape, then they've got viable seeds in them that you could put in the earth, and they would grow up and turn into a living plant. And so during the Buddha's lifetime, then this was brought up, saying, well, we're a bit concerned because these seeds, we know there's seeds in these particular plants or these particular fruits, and so they get destroyed, or they can easily be destroyed while you're eating. And so what should we do? And so the Buddha then established this little ritual to, in effect, to technically kill the seeds and say, okay, these are now can be considered non-viable. So if you happen to destroy them by biting down on them, then you won't have transgressed any precept. So that's the origin of it. So just literally the words mean, please make this allowable, and then the other person says, I make this allowable.
I think these things go to extremes. I like the middle part of the Buddha.
So it was a convenient compromise.
Ajahn Amaro, I have a question regarding meat. I read in Bhikkhu's, it's not an autobiography, but biography, which I think is in the shell. She had this ability to connect with the spirits of freshly, murdered, slaughtered, or animals and people who died when she was meditating, which Ajahn Amaro tried to, I don't know whether no, at that point it was not Ajahn Amaro, it was Ajahn Amaro tried to, get her away from because she got stuck there. But she's kind of referring to one instance where she was meditating and connecting with the consciousness of a bull who was just a buffalo who was just slaughtered, and was apparently it had happened in a very cruel way, and the owner was very angry with the buffalo, and so it was very unpleasant for the buffalo, and he suffered and complained, and she would, apart from giving him Dhamma teaching about 5 precepts,
The buffalo.
the buffalo, because he was going astray, and the owner had a lot of trouble with the neighbors because of this buffalo. Anyway, so he decided to kill him, and so in the end, the buffalo is kind of really, or the spirit of consciousness is really keen to come to a higher way of rebirth, or whatever you want to call it. And so he asked her, Michikyo, to make it known to people that his meat will be on the market tomorrow, and that they should buy his meat and offer it to the monastery so that he could make merit.
Okay.
And which was to gain a better next life. Anyway, so I thought, that sounds very beautiful. Is it more realm of fantasy, or is there actually anything the Buddha has referred to in that sense?
Not that I know. I mean, she was a nun of great reputation, so I wouldn't say that she was lying or just making it up. But I can't think of anything in particular that the Buddha says about that. You have the Jataka stories where he, as a bodhisattva, offers his life as a hare, and he jumps onto the fire. He's been tested by Indra, he doesn't realize it, but he offers his body, so jumping onto the fire so that the Brahmin yogi in the forest can have something to eat. So he offers his own physical form, but then when he jumps into the fire is cold, the flames are cold. And so rather than actually dying, then the Brahmin says, well, actually I'm really Indra, and congratulations, you passed the test, well done. And then carves the face of the hare on the moon. So you have that sort of offering, an animal offering its body to up in that way, and then the also feeding the hungry tigress, that the jumping off the cliff to so that the tigress can eat the bodhisattva's body as a person, and to then she could feed her cubs. But I can't think of any particular story just like that, where it would say, my the meat from my body will be a way of me making good karma. But you do have a few animal stories. I mean, there are traditions whereby that's a way that an animal can get, a being that's been born in the animal realms can get out of the animal realms is by by acts of generosity or self-sacrifice. And there's that story of the snake that was swallowing Lumpu Sopa. That he was a very wonderful old monk. I met him in 2009, and I think he was 112 or 113 years old at that point. And he eventually passed away at about 117, a couple of years ago. And when he was on Tudong as a monk, he was staying in this cave. I'm not sure. I think it was somewhere in Burma. In that he travelled on foot for 50 or 60 years from Thailand into India and China and all around. Anyway, he was in this cave, and it was the middle of the night, and he was resting, and then he woke up with this very, very strange sensation in his legs. And then in the sort of dim light of the cave, he looked down and he realized he was being swallowed by a reticulated python. That can dislocate their jaws, and his legs were in the mouth of this python. So being a very composed monk, he didn't panic, and he formed this thought in his mind, and the thought was, good snake, I realize that you need to eat, and I don't want to deprive you of your meal, but the fact is that I've made a resolution to realize full enlightenment in this lifetime, and I have not managed to reach that goal yet. So, good snake, if you can guarantee that by the act of you eating me, that I will realize full enlightenment before I die, then please carry on swallowing me. If, however, you cannot guarantee that, then it might be a good idea if you desisted. And so then, as he recounted the story, of course he was alive to tell the story, then the snake stopped swallowing him and then started backing off and left him alone. And so, as you might expect, he spent the rest of the night in meditation. Sleep was lost to him at that point, and so he wasn't going to just roll over and go back to La La Land. But when dawn came, and he went out, he got ready to go out with his arms round, and he left the cave, and he saw up in the branches of a tree just outside the cave that the snake was there, and it had died. And so his understanding, or my understanding of it, was that because of that generous act, then that being's life in the animal realm came to an end. And so you might think, oh, poor thing, it died, but it was more that it was able to die from this realm and then reappear in a more fortunate birth, and so it was able to create good karma from that act. And similarly, there's when the Buddha left the quarrelling monks of Kosambi and went to live in the Parileya forest, he was looked after for the rains by an elephant and a monkey. That the monkey used to climb into the trees and pick fruit for the Buddha and offer that. And it's said that at the end of the rains retreat, when the Buddha travelled on from the forest, then the monkey died. And there's a stupa just outside of Vesali. That's a stupa for the monkey that's still there today. That was after the monkey died. But again, it was not sort of a tragedy, but it was more like the monkey was able to make a lot of merit and to create enough good karma to leave the animal realm and reappear in a more fortunate birth.